The Super Smash Bros. Series represents the characters on the roster in a lot of meaningful ways. The most obvious of which is of course the moveset, as that's the most important in establishing the feel of the character. Mario likes to jump around, so he's designed around platform combos. Kirby is meant to be a beginner character, so he's designed to be easy. Sonic is annoying. But outside of just the movesets, the Smash series has plenty of aesthetic ways to show what a character is all about too. One of the most underrated aspects of this are all of the different character renders seen in the game. These are obviously essential in showing you who you're playing as on the character select screen and on the versus screen before matches. Every single character has one of these, and I think they're a great way of expressing what a character is all about. But with there being so many renders, some are bound to be worse than others, so today I thought it'd be fun to rank every single character render in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I'll be ranking these based on how unique their pose is, how expressive it is, how cool or funny it is, and how much it fits their character. This will lead to some characters by default having a much easier time getting a good render, as some are just more expressive than others. As we go, I'll be separating this video off into tiers, so everything on the same tier is about equal quality wise, but they are ordered. Also, you may notice that while we have 113 renders to rank today, there are much less than 113 characters in the game. That's because some characters got alternate costumes that got completely different renders, so they're going to take up their own spots on the ranking. I only included the ones that actually change the character's pose though. If you wanted me to rank Builder Mario separately from normal Mario, you're out of luck.
I'm gonna break my monitor, I swear!
We're gonna be going through a lot of these pretty quickly by the way, so don't expect a full 2-hour analysis on why Wendy Koopa's render is the greatest piece of art ever made. If you do enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right in. Starting off, we have our F tier, which is our smallest tier made up of only 3 renders that I find to be incredibly lame. These are pretty much the only ones I'd call bad, which is why they're in their own tier. So starting off our list with probably the least surprising last place of all time, 113, Mel Corrin. This render does such a great job of truly giving off the feeling of boredom. Right away, due to a lot of characters in Smash using swords, it does make a lot of the sword user renders feel a bit samey. There are definitely good ones, but Corrin is not that. He's got just about the most boring pose you could imagine. The effects on his sword look cool and at least his cape is flowing in the wind, but it's kind of hard to look at any of that when he has the most dull expression of all time. You get absolutely nothing about his character from this besides him being boring. So I guess that makes this a pretty accurate render. I really don't think anyone will disagree with me on this one in the comments. 112, Lucario. This one might be a bit more controversial, but I just find this one to be so boring too. It's about the most basic fighting stance you can imagine, and I just don't feel anything while looking at it. I won't say it doesn't fit Lucario, but I think they could have done something better. Funnily enough, let's look back at Corrin. He has some neat particle effects on his sword, so why not give Lucario some particle effects to spruce his up too? He could have been aura farming. If they did that, I think this would have been much higher on the list, but as it is now, I just can't get behind it. 111, Hero the Luminary. Funnily enough, my favorite hero alt has my least favorite render of the bunch. He sure is standing there with his sword and his shield. Like I said, we've got a lot of swordies, so the fact that this does quite literally nothing special hurts this one a lot more. I could even see an argument for this being the worst render in the game due to Corrin at least having some cool particle effects. What gives Hero the edge for me though is his face. It at least feels like he has a bit more determination than whatever Corrin was supposed to be feeling. It'll be a lot easier to show what makes the Luminary hero the worst once we see the other 3 heroes with much better poses. And now it's time for our D tier, renders that aren't bad per se, they just don't excite me much. In general, the Smash team did a great job with the renders in this game, so I do like almost all of them. Kicking off this tier, we have 110 Mii Sword Fighter, 109 Mii Gunner, and 108 Mii Brawler. These are always going to be low on the list due to the fact that they're supposed to be basic. They have to fit with whatever freakish monstrosity you want to put on the Mii's face, so their simple poses are understandable. All 3 of them do a good job keeping their weapon in the forefront, and of the collection, I like Mii Brawler the best because it does a good job showing how he'll use both his fists and his feet while attacking. Again, these 3 are not bad renders, I just don't think they can reasonably go any higher. 107, Mr. Game & Watch. Kinda similar to the Mii's, it doesn't really make much sense to bring him much higher. This was probably one of the easiest renders for them to make, and I will give them credit that they certainly tried to make this stand out a little bit. I like the number 1 flag, that's cute. 106, Chrom. I'm putting this a bit lower than many of the other sword ones because I never loved the cape on this. Many swordies have flowing capes to make their renders more dynamic, but for Chrom, it feels like it takes up too much space. It just sort of comes out as a big blue blob. His stance is fine enough though, albeit pretty generic. 105, Jigglypuff. Just not a lot going on here. I like that it keeps her in her bald state, but at the same time, it doesn't tell me a lot about Jigglypuff. Honestly, I think her Smash 4 render is better, as it feels like she's putting on a performance, which is pretty in line with Jigglypuff's character. At the very least, both of these are better than the Brawl one. 104, Pac-Man. Here we got another ball character, but they did a bit of a better job making this more exciting by having him jump. I just don't know if the action of jumping is the main thing I'd associate with Pac-Man. It doesn't help that I was also a big fan of his Smash 4 render. A thumbs up will always be funny. 103, Diddy Kong. I just don't really know what I'm supposed to get from this. I like that his limbs are all spread out along with his tail because that does feel pretty monkey-like, especially with him balancing on one leg. It is pretty playful, but I just don't think it's one of the best. 102, Isabelle. She's just kind of walking here, so it looks like an animal crossing your path.
Say that again?
I guess it kind of fits Animal Crossing's more laid-back nature, but that feels like a huge stretch. The main thing carrying it up higher than what we've seen so far is the fact that I like how happy she is with her facial expression. 101, Squirtle. This does feel pretty playful, which I think fits with Squirtle being the smallest and fastest of Pokemon trainers' arsenal. It just doesn't feel super special to Squirtle. It maybe could have used some water effects. Like Isabelle though, the facial expression is very solid here. 100, Ness. You know, I do like the pose, but Ness's eyes are so soulless. There's not really much they could have done about that since that's just his character design, but it makes me mildly uncomfortable when he stares into my soul. Again though, the pose is pretty good with him holding his bat over his shoulder. I'm not sure if the bat is the best thing to express Ness as a psychic character, but at least it is something he uses in the game. 99, Zero Suit Samus. I like that she's pointing her gun, but there's just something weird about this pose that feels off to me. Maybe it's just the way her body is twisted with her taking a step forward as well. Her expression also isn't that interesting, but it seems in line with her character, so I won't hold it against this. 98, Kazuya. Ever since he was added as DLC, this render has always looked a bit off to me. I think it's the way his torso is turned away from the camera. It feels much more squished than it should be. It's a shame too, because there are some good details here like the glowing eye, and I think the legs look pretty firm, but the pose as a whole just doesn't look right. 97, Pikachu. To be completely honest, I wanted to put this one lower, but it actually has a solid reference in the Pokemon series being based on his Gen 2 sprite. I still feel like they could have done more to make this look cooler, but this is fine I guess. 96, Pichu. This is just a cuter version of Pikachu, so I think it makes sense to put them back to back. To me, it really comes down to the expression. Pichu's smile looks like he has way less thought behind his eyes, which I think makes it even better. 95, Zelda. I do like how flowy this is with her hair and dress having a lot of movement, but I still feel like there could have been more done here. Even if they didn't want to go as far as to add some magic particles, they probably could have made her facial expression a bit more playful to fit this rendition of the character. As it is now, this is a good render, it just doesn't feel very specialized to Zelda, and uniqueness is a big part of the list. But now it's time we go on a bit of a sword streak. Like I said, there are a lot of swordies in this game, which means that many of them have very similar renders. None of these are bad, they just don't feel very special to me. There will be plenty of great sword renders as we move up the list, so if you don't agree with these being lower now, I hope once we get to those better ones, I can explain what makes them so good to me. 94, Male Robin. Now they do a little to make this one stand out by having Robin hold his tome and point with his sword hand, so it kinda looks like he's casting a spell. At the same time though, I can't help but feel like this was the biggest missed opportunity. He 100% could have had some particle effects on his Levin sword or on his tome to show that he's a magical character. So while this is a lot more unique than some of the others in this streak, it feels like there is still a lot of wasted potential. 93, Male Byleth. He is certainly standing there with his sword. At least they did give it some flame effects, so that's pretty cool. Plus the way he holds it out in front of him with the reverse grip is cool too. 92, Lucina. The way her cape flows looks a bit better than Byleth. In this case, I also kinda like that it's not the most unique thing since it's supposed to be similar to 91, Marth. They both have a similar idea of their cape flowing in the wind, and while their stance is mostly the same, I like that there are some subtle differences, like the direction they hold their sword and the direction their cape is flowing in. Even if these are quite basic renders, they fit both of them perfectly fine, and I wouldn't change them. 90, Hero Eredrick. Again, similar concept, but I like this one more because he also has a shield, and the facial expression is a lot better. 89, Female Byleth. Much more dynamic stance than her male counterpart, it feels much more flowy. I also like the way her sword and left arm go together in the same direction. The higher angled sword also looks much more unique to me. 88, Female Robin. While this does have the lack of particle issues that Male Robin did, I do like her holding the book over her head much more. It puts more importance on it, which I think is what they should be going for. Her facial expression is much more flat than Male Robin though. And with that, we end our sword streak for now and move on into the C tier. These are much better renders, but just have a few things holding them down for me. We're definitely already getting into the hard to criticize territory. 87, Olimar. I could see this one being controversial because I'm kinda mixed on it myself. I think it makes sense to feature the Pikmin so prominently, but at the same time, it also makes this render kinda messy. It just feels like there's too much going on here, and yeah, that does fit with Pikmin, but I just don't love looking at it myself. Also, before you comment, Alf's render is the same, shut up. 86, Rosalina. I can at least appreciate that they gave her some magic particles on her wand here, and it does look like she's commanding Luma. Her main pose though is just pretty boring to look at for me. Compare this to many other characters with dresses, and Rosalina's just feels much plainer. Not to mention her expression is also quite generic. This all does fit with her more quiet personality, I guess, but in the same way Corrin's render fits with him being boring. So while it does a good job expressing the character, I don't really find the character that interesting. This is like the nicest I've ever been to her. 85, Dark Samus. I like that this render is pretty floaty as it sets it apart from Samus's much more grounded stance. It's supposed to be a bit more laid back, so it looks like Dark Samus doesn't really have to put much effort in, which seems to fit the character fine, but makes the render kind of uninteresting to look at. 84, Ridley. For me, I just feel like this is a bit too messy. The way the wings and the arms and the tail overlap just make it seem like there's so much going on here without a super strong pose. The way he's kind of crunched into it makes him seem smaller than he is too. The face is great on this one though, he looks pretty menacing. 83, Mega Man. I'm always personally a fan of a character pointing their weapon, and I think Mega Man's stance here is pretty good for that. Unfortunately, while I do think his body posing is good, that face is pretty soulless. Granted, it does fit his portrayal in Smash as a never-feeling, empty husk of a robot that's always staring forward. There's nothing behind his eyes, just a soulless gaze forever piercing through whoever and whatever is in front of it. He might be scarier than Freddy Fazbear. Despite that though, I really don't like that direction personally. Being a bit more expressive as a whole would be nice to see, but that would require a Mega Man overhaul much bigger than just the render. 82, Larry. And here we have the first of the Koopalings, because just like in my boxing ring ranking, they each got their own unique render specifically to stretch out the runtime. Why did I think this is going to be a short video? Larry's is understandably the most basic of the Koopalings, but it's still quite cute. He looks ready to charge into battle, and I think that's a pretty good choice for him. But you know what he should really be charging into? Mario Kart World, please, 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 please. 81, Wii Fit Trainer. As fitness instructors, it makes complete sense for them to be doing a stretch. I decided to combine both the female and male alts here since they are doing the exact same pose. Like Larry, they both seem ready for a fight, but it fits slightly better on these guys. 80, Shulk. A bit more of a unique sword render as he's taking the Monado off of his back. It's still not super special, but it at least puts it above the more generic swordies we saw before. 79, Dark Pit. I really like that this render features his staff, as that's the main thing that separates Dark Pit from normal Pit. And of course the fact that he's extra grumpy. The way his wings fly out behind him also adds a nice bit of detail. 78, Daisy. You can definitely feel her more energetic personality here. The way she jumps into the air with her hand over her head makes her seem super amped for a fight. Now I don't know if it's just me, but there is something weird about her eyes. It looks like there's no thoughts behind them. Maybe they're just too far apart, but her expression always seems slightly off to me. 77, Piranha Plant. This is just about everything you could want for a Piranha Plant render. It shows off both his sharp teeth and sharp leaves pretty well. There's just obviously not a ton they could do with him, so I can't bring it too much higher. 76, Wendy. The wink is a great detail to show how she thinks she's cute. Keywords being she thinks. 75, Bayonetta. Similar idea to Wendy with the wink, but there's obviously quite a bit more going on here. I can't tell if I like her hair flying all over the place or not. On the one hand, it does fit off her more show-offy personality, but at the same time, it does make this render a slight bit messy. So I think keeping it in C tier is pretty fair. 74, Ludwig. While he is my favorite Koopaling, I do think most of the others got slightly better renders. I do still think this captures Ludwig pretty well though. He's normally seen as the big final boss of the Koopaling, so giving him the more determined expression makes sense. His outstretched hand sort of looks like he's trying to command people too, which again fits quite well for his leader position. 73, Mewtwo. His expression is great. It really looks both intimidating and full of anger. The stance though is honestly not that special. It does a good job working his tail into the empty space, but it just doesn't feel as powerful as it could. He's another character that I think would have benefited greatly from some purple psychic particle effects. His leaned away stance does at least feel more magic based rather than leaning toward the screen for a physical fight. 72, Pit. By default, he gets a bit of an advantage over many of the other swordies due to him being a dual wielder. That makes his pose a lot more interesting, and I like how his weapons, wings, and clothes all flow toward the right. It makes this much more visually appealing. The main thing I would criticize is probably just the expression. I think it's fine to just give him a determined look, but Pit also had the potential to be a lot more cartoony. 71, Falco. I like how this kind of goes along with Fox's render while also setting themselves apart. While Fox shows off his laser, Falco features his wings much more prominently, which obviously makes sense for him being a bird. I think his look over the shoulder was also a good choice to show off his cool guy personality. 70, King Dedede. I think this one does a great job of feeling quite pompous. The way he's got his hammer swung over his shoulder and his other hand on his hip makes him look both confident and sort of above the fight. Sure, it is pretty basic with him just standing there, but I feel like it does a good job of capturing his personality. And with that, we can now move on to our B tier, and from this point on, I pretty much have nothing but positives to say about all of these. Funny number, Richter. This pose is actually based directly on the cover of Castlevania Rondo of Blood, which I think is a neat reference. As a pose though, it is a little bit basic feeling. I don't get much about his character here beside the whip appearing in his hand. The facial expression also just looks like a complete default stare. It's at least a memorable pose though, even if it doesn't seem all too special to Richter. 68, female Pokemon trainer. While I do like Red's render a lot more, I think Leaf here also got a pretty good one. It does a good job placing emphasis on the Pokeball, since obviously she's not the one fighting herself. The pose and expression are also both very playful, which fits perfectly with a young trainer just looking for a battle. 67, Duck Hunt. Notice how I didn't say funny number for that one. Anyway, I think the idea behind this one is pretty cute, with the duck lifting the dog off the ground. You can even see the dog's fur bunch up where he's being pulled from. Besides the cute idea for the pose, everything else is about what you would expect from a generic dog and duck, but this does a good job showing how these two work together. 66, Ivysaur. I'm really happy they included Ivysaur's Vine Whip here. It's such a unique attack to her that it would have felt a bit sad not to see it. The way she's jumping in with the Vine Whips flying toward the same direction makes this render look like it's taken right in the middle of action. 65, Iggy. In the Mario series, his personality can usually be summed up as the weird one, so I like that this pose is kind of strange too, with him pointing behind his back. It's nothing crazy, but I think it captures his character well enough. 64, Ice Climbers. Honestly, I think they just did a great job posing the two around each other. Nana perfectly fills the open space to the top right, which is left after Popo's hammer swing. I also think the way she's hopping in is great. It's sort of like a surprise attack coming up from behind Popo. Only thing that could maybe drag this down is just the generic smiles of the Ice Climbers, but honestly they look kind of funny, so I let it slide. 63, female Corin. I have absolutely no clue why they made hers so much more dynamic than her male counterpart. The jumping in pose is way better than the angle of the sword in front of her is also much more interesting, along with it retaining the cool purple particle effects we saw before. Add on the flowing cape and hair as well, and this render is genuinely 100 times better for no reason. 62, Samus. Obviously she does have the debuff of having her face obscured by her mask, so we can't really get a facial expression. Despite that though, the pose here is strong enough to tell us all we need to know. Her stance is very sturdy, and with her arm cannon ready to fire, she looks like a force to be reckoned with. Again, it's a shame we can't see her face, but I think this is about what we could have hoped for. 61, Hero 8. And here we got hero number 3. Or 8, whatever, shut up. I like the sword over the shoulder pose quite a bit, along with his fantastic confident smirk. He knows he's gonna kill you with some random garbage. But what I really love about this is that we get to see the little mouse in his pocket too. That's always been my favorite part about this hero, so I'm happy it got to make a little cameo here. 60, Palutena. I really like the choice to add her special light effect behind her head here. It really gives off a feeling of divinity, which makes sense seeing as she is the goddess of light. Her stance also feels quite majestic, like she's slowly stepping towards you from the light, especially with the way her hair spreads out behind her. Only thing I don't love here is once again the face, but it's also not bad because the more bland expression kind of fits with her goddess status. Everything I see from her personality wise makes Palutena seem much more silly, but since they clearly wanted to go with a divine sort of angle for this render here, I think this works fine. 59, Sora Wisdom form, and 58, Sora Valor form. Sora got 4 different renders to reference 4 different pieces of artwork from the Kingdom Hearts series. That's kind of a bit overboard, but I won't complain about it because it just adds more cool stuff to the game. I get about the same feeling looking at both of these, so I decided to keep them together. I like the more angry expressions on these two compared to the goofy smile of his main render that we'll see in a bit. These also show what makes Sora distinct from other sword fighters by both of them floating. Of the two, I think I slightly prefer the more straight up pose compared to the flying backwards pose, but they're both pretty good. 57 Pyra and 56 Mithra. Hey, would you look at that? It's another pair of floating swordies. Pyra and Mithra work really well together, so I think keeping them that way on the list again makes sense. They sort of act as mirrors for each other's renders, which puts them slightly above Sora's last two for me. The arms stretching out towards each other looks great, especially when you combine the two renders together. It kind of looks like Mithra's giving Pyra bunny ears, and I think that's a funny detail. As for which of these two I prefer, I think I like Mithra's more cocky expression compared to Pyra's calmer smile. Plus Mithra's longer hair allows for some more movement behind her. 55 Roy. Koopa. I'm not exactly sure what he's doing in this pose, but it also just fits him really well. It looks confident and like he's trying to appear cool, and since he is the cool one, that seems pretty fitting. He looks ready to blast right into a fight with his fist leading the way. 54 Donkey Kong. Not only is he flexing his muscles here, but that massive grin is fantastic for his characterization. He is absolutely ready to punch a hole straight through his opponent, and his fist being balled up here also helps to sell that too. 53 Morton. Honestly though, I think I might prefer Morton flexing his muscles just a bit more than Donkey Kong. That's mostly because I think his back facing towards the camera makes this seem much more powerful. It's also pretty unique since most characters in the game have their chest facing toward the viewer. Seeing as Morton is always presented as the beefy Koopaling, I can't think of any better render choice. 52, Min Min. As much as I may hate fighting against her, they definitely did her justice with this pose. The way she stands on her toes makes it look like she's both a good fighter and a nimble one. That especially matches with the flow of her two arms, and I like that her torso is reeled back and ready to launch a big punch with her Ram Ram arm. The dragon arm also getting the special spotlight in the front makes sense, seeing as that's the arm she'll always have equipped no matter what. And it's also the one that cheats the most. Her expression also feels pretty confident too, really no complaints on this one. 51, Yoshi. He just seems so joyful and whimsical. I mean, how could you hate that smile? Oh, that's how. This just fits Yoshi's carefree nature in the Mario series pretty perfectly, and maybe I'm looking too far into it, but him strutting here also sort of makes me think about how he's used as a steed in the games. And of course, I gotta love that he's waving hello.
Hi.
50, Sora. This one just looks extremely goofy with that dorky smile. Like I said for the other two Altifas we saw before, this is directly based on some art from Kingdom Hearts, and of his selection, I'd say this is definitely the most iconic, seeing as it's his original look. While this pose is definitely much less dynamic than the previous two, this artwork is what my mind immediately jumps to when picturing Sora, and the big goofy smile is a massive plus as well. 49, Male Pokemon Trainer. I always have a pretty big bias towards Red since he is my favorite Pokemon trainer, but I think they did a pretty great job with this render here. The Pokeball is again pretty prominent like it was with Leaf, but I like how he's also sort of cocking his arm back to throw it. His other hand pointing is also a fantastic choice to show how he's not the one fighting himself, but rather the person telling the Pokemon what to do. The determined look on his face also fits him perfectly well. 48, Villager. Compared to Isabelle's render way earlier on the list, I think this captures the vibe of Animal Crossing in a much more unique way. No other character on the roster uses a net, so featuring it here works really well, especially since the net is a major part of the Animal Crossing series. The posing here feels very light and playful, with him taking a big step forward to try and catch whoever's in front of him. Also, as a quick note, all of the villager genders have the same pose. 47, Inkling Girl. Once again, we got another one on the more playful side, which is helped by her twisted stance and confident smirk. The splatter shot being the weapon of focus was also a good choice here, as it's definitely the most iconic from Splatoon. I'm also happy that they made the ink tank clearly in view here, as that's her main mechanic in Smash. 46, Inkling Boy. A lot of similar praises go to him, but the more dashing pose makes me like this one just a little bit more. It fits the fast competitive nature of Splatoon while also still feeling quite playful. 45, Bowser Jr. And here we finally get the main ult of the Koopaling set, and I think they captured his childish pride perfectly. The way he's hopping out of his clown car with his fist in the air has such a perfect proud energy to it. You can really tell that he thinks he's the GOAT, and I'd expect nothing less from him. But now it's time for us to enter into the A tiers, the ones I think are really good. 44, Captain Falcon. This one looks like Falcon is raring back for a big punch, and if you know anything about Falcon in Smash, it probably has to do with punches. Now this is not the iconic Falcon punch pose, which is far more exaggerated, but I think this works better for the render. The bigger, more controlled pose gives him a stronger superhero vibe, which is what I think they're usually trying to go for with this characterization. 43, Toon Link. By the nature of his games, he's already one of the most expressive characters on the roster, and I don't think this render disappoints. He's absolutely determined to fight as hard as he can, and that's shown with how far he's leaned into his sword swing. Now to me, the grip on the sword is maybe a little weird, but it still gets across the idea of him swinging it quite well. 42, Bayonetta 1. Just like Sora, she got different renders based on her different game appearances. I was actually quite surprised by how much more I like this one compared to the main ult. She keeps the wink here, but also pouts her lips, which I think adds quite a bit to the expression. The leg up dash away pose also just gives off a more agile vibe, and if you've ever been hit by a Bayo combo, you know that that's sadly pretty accurate. And another thing that I think helps this one is the fact that it actually looks like she's aiming her guns here, which she wasn't doing in the first render. So all around, I think this one is a major improvement. 41, Ike. In my opinion, this is definitely one of the better sword renders. I love how firm Ike's stance is here, and the way both his sword and left arm point together looks really good. You can really get the feel that he's a lot stronger of a sword fighter than the others just from his strong stance in this render. Plus the flowing cape and headband are always great additions too. The stupid dumb baby Ike render doesn't count. 40, Wolf. Honestly, I think a big reason for why I like this one so much is just because of how much I like Wolf's design in Ultimate. It looks perfectly fierce. Just like me. Claws are a big part of Wolf's most iconic moves, so making them both clearly on display was a great choice. The way his single red eye pierces through really ties it all together to feel perfectly sinister. 39, Hero Solo. What's probably my least favorite hero skin got my favorite render of the bunch. I really love this sword stance because it looks like he's about to dash and thrust the sword directly into his enemy. That's helped even more by his facial expression with his gritted teeth, because it really looks like he's putting in the work to kill whoever's on the receiving end of his blade. 38, Little Mac. It's a pretty simple boxing stance all things considered, but what else else could you really ask for with Mac? I also think the defensive position works well with Punch-Out's very strategic nature. 37, Link. Speaking of defensive positions, I love how prominent the Hylian shield is here. Not only does Link hiding behind it make him seem much more experienced, which is expected of the champion, but the Hylian shield is super iconic, so it's nice for it to get the spotlight. Of course, the Master Sword is still in play here too, and he looks totally ready to swing it the moment he finds an opening. 36, Ryu. This exudes the deep anger of a cartoon reviewer after the security system
takes control of Squidward's house and begins attacking the city.
In all seriousness, I love how this just screams no nonsense. Ryu absolutely looks like he's ready to beat you up at a moment's notice, but the crossed arms make it seem like his opponent is nothing compared to him. 35, Ganondorf. That sinister smirk is absolutely the expression I would expect to see on the Great King of Evil. The pose itself, I'm not really sure exactly what he's doing, but the cape flowing with the outstretched hand does add quite a bit to his menacing energy. 34, Incineroar. That angry snarl both fits his wrestler persona and of course the fact that he's a cat. Him shoving his claw at the camera also helps with that aspect as well, even if he doesn't really use the claws themselves a ton while attacking. My favorite part about this though has to be the fire effects on his belt. They do such a great job with the effects on the few renders that have them, and this might just be my favorite bits of fire on any render. 33, Young Link. It's pretty much the same as normal Link's, but mirrored in the opposite direction. I think it makes total sense to keep these renders so similar, but Young Link does a lot of subtle things better in my opinion. I like that the sword is more vertical this time, and his body seems a bit more twisted to really lean into a deadly sword swing. Young Link's expression is also a lot better to me, as it's both more visible and feels more angry. 32, Sephiroth. In a lot of ways, this kind of reminds me of Palutena's render. The way they're both nonchalantly stepping forward makes them feel above this battle, as if they don't have to put any effort in. Sephiroth also isn't holding his sword in an attacking position, which just continues the non-caring attitude. On top of that, his wing adds some good balance to the render, especially with his hair flowing in the opposite direction. It also sort of gives off that divine effect that Palutena's light did, though this time in a much more sinister way. His sly, tiny smile also does a great job showing his complete lack of worry. The only thing that's holding this back is the fact that they made his sword much smaller here. I get that it probably would have looked a lot worse if it was its true length, but the way it's shown here makes it seem like an average katana rather than the absurdly long blade that it actually is. 31, Cloud. Funnily enough, Cloud gets to beat out his enemy by perfecting Sephiroth's main flaw. The Buster Sword is shoved right up into her face here, taking up a large portion of the render silhouette. Just by looking at it, you could tell it's going to pack a punch. Cloud's stance while holding this absurdly beefy sword is also extremely controlled, which I think goes to show how powerful Cloud himself is too. 30, Simon. He's helped a lot by his unique weapon. While Richter also had a whip, his was all rolled up, whereas Simon lets it loose in a really cool looking way. I love how the whip waves around him, and it makes this render feel super dynamic. Simon himself is also pretty well done too, with his gravely serious expression and hair flying out behind him. 29, Banjo and Kazooie. This is definitely my favorite render with multiple characters. First off, I love Banjo's stupid walk. It fits his goofy nature perfectly. His face to me also makes it seem like he's a bit surprised by Kazooie popping out of his backpack, which is also very cute. Her pose is quite silly too, with their wings spread out like that, but notably less silly than Banjo, which does make sense with him being the goofier of the two. 28, Kirby. This is probably the most full of joy render on the roster. You could just feel Kirby's whimsy as he pumps his hand into the air. This is a more exaggerated take on a pose that Kirby is often seen pulling in a lot of artwork, so I think this was also a pretty good choice. If there was anyone who is going to be purely happy in the render, I think it should be Kirby. Unless you're playing in America, then he's going to be angry. 27, Peach. I just think this one does a great job of feeling very elegant. The inclusion of her parasol was a fantastic choice to not only make this feel more like Peach, but also to fill out the image a bit more. The way her hair and dress flow in the wind, along with her standing on one foot, really gives off a perfect magical princess vibe for Peach. 26, Meta Knight. Despite his tiny body, they managed to make him look like an absolute menace. A big part of that is of course his cape arcing over him to really add a lot of size to the render. I also love him leaning in with his sword, as it looks like he's ready to clash blades the second his opponent makes a move. And of course, because of the way his mask is shaped, his eyes look quite angry, which all builds to make this a pretty intimidating render. 25, Ken. I love how different this one is from Ryu. Despite Ken being his echo, personality-wise they are quite different, and I think the two separate renders capture that well. While Ryu is stern and serious, Ken is a lot more energetic and prideful. The choice of him beckoning his opponent to fight shows that difference off perfectly. Same goes for that extremely smug grin. 24, Kazuya suit. Okay, I think this is another one like Wolf where a lot of the heavy lifting is done because of the design. The business suit really just adds to the intimidation factor. The angle of this one also plays a big part in that too, as we're sort of looking up toward Kazuya rather than straight on. That makes him seem a lot bigger, and the fact that his eyes are looking down on us shows that his opponent is beneath him. Add on the glowing red eye from the first render that I liked, and this one turned out to be pretty great. 23, Joker School. Okay, honestly, I just find this one to be really funny. He's doing the dorky anime push-up glasses thing, which I think is made even more dorky with how he holds his elbow while doing it. This is probably the easiest render to do in real life, and I think that contrast works well with the more fantastical normal Joker render we'll see in a bit. 22, Snake. I like this one a lot because it's something that only Snake could really do. Not only is he crouching down, which fits well with this stealth-based gameplay, but he's using his hand to call someone on his ear. This really nails the feeling of a spy sneaking around a facility, and I think that's about the best thing Snake could have hoped for. 21, Lucas. Hey, speaking of Snake, I think it was a really interesting choice to use his rope snake here. It's one of the main defining differences between him and Ness, so while it is still a bit sad that we don't see any psychic stuff here, I do quite like the choice. The way the snake wraps around behind Lucas too is really well done, and I love that they made him a bit shocked by a snake appearing by having him take a step back and holding up his other arm. It fits Lucas's more cowardly personality, and because they did that, his eyes don't feel nearly as soulless as Ness's do. 20, Lemmy. As for my favorite Koopaling render, Lemmy once again gets to take the win over his siblings. Not only did he beat them all out in the boxing ring video, but he's easily got the most unique render here. Seeing as he's meant to be the goofy Koopaling, him standing on the side of his clown car while making a wacky expression is pretty perfect. In fact, he's the only Koopaling to not be sat in his clown car for their render, which makes him stand out even more. Just due to how expressive he is in the Mario series, it was almost a guarantee for him to do well in this sort of video. 19, Sephiroth shirtless. This time his sword looks like the proper length as it extends well past his body. I love that his facial expression is basically the exact same as the first render, but his body poses in a much more action-oriented stance. It feels like now he's really ready to unleash his power, but he's still showing a face of being above it all. 18, Cloud Advent Children. I swear I didn't do this on purpose, but Cloud just beat Sephiroth out once again. It has a similar idea to his original render of shoving the Buster Sword directly in our faces, but I find Cloud's pose this time to be a bit more interesting. The one-handed grip shows even more strength than the original two-handed grip he used to have. That leaves his left arm open, so I think swinging it back along with his coat makes the pose feel a bit more dynamic as a whole. A lot of that is because the Advent Children design allows for more parts of his clothes to be waving behind him too, but I do think the pose is just better than the first one overall. 17, Roy. Not Koopa. This is definitely my favorite of the Fire Emblem renders in Smash, as I think it does the best job showing what makes its character unique. He's got his reverse grip fully on display here, which is one of his defining characteristics. His other main characteristic would have to be his aggression, which this pose also perfectly presents. The way his arm and cape are flying back show how he's already rushed in for a sword swipe. Compare that to most other stories which are just preparing for an attack, Roy already going through with his sword swipe here makes him seem all the more vicious. And that's all without mentioning his yelling expression, which is clearly the most passionate face of all the Fire Emblem characters. So even if Roy may not be the most special moveset wise, I think they definitely nailed his render the best. 16, Terry. People used to love putting his pants on everyone for some reason. Look at Freddy in the pants. Even beside the kind of funny way his legs jut out here, the rest of the pose is great. Him holding his cap down over his eye looks really cool, and him flinging his thumb off to the side kind of looks like he's telling his opponent to get out. I think this all just fits Terry's stylish pride and confidence extremely well. 15, King K. Rool. Okay, I don't exactly know why he's doing this, but the point is very funny. I guess it sort of fits his more cartoonishly evil vibe compared to someone like Ganondorf. The hand on his hip as he points just adds to the goofy nature of the pose too. At the same time, despite how silly it is, it does feel like it belongs to a villain. His eyes are dead set on whatever he's pointing at, and I personally would not want to be the target. This is a very memorable pose, so I can't help but place it high up on the list. 14, Rob. This is just one of the goofiest renders of the bunch, but that's why I love it. I mean, let's take a look at Rob's previous two renders. Those would both be near the bottom of the list, which makes the ultimate contrast all the better. I understand the reasoning for making the other so stiff because he is a robot, but I love that they went in this new direction here. Even with the more wacky pose though, it still feels like something Rob could do. You can tell how his spine is bending along each of his segments and his arms are still quite angular. So it maintains the feeling of being a robot, but also gets the benefit of being pretty wacky. This is a good example of adding some personality to someone who doesn't really have an expressive face. And here we have our S tier. I don't necessarily think these are leagues better than what we've already seen, but they're my personal favorites because I either love the concept for being cool or just find them hilarious. Starting off, we have 13, Greninja. He's my favorite Pokemon, so I'll always have a little bit of bias for him. That's especially the case because I also think ninjas are awesome, so this agile ninja pose is really cool to me. The fact that he's hopped off the ground and jumping towards the side shows how quick and nimble he really is. Plus the tongue acting as a scarf here works exceptionally well to sell the movement of the jump. 12. Sheik. Wow, surprise surprise, another ninja character. This has a very similar idea as Greninja, but since she's flipped to jumping the opposite way, I don't really think they step on each other's toes. Sheik also uses her scarf here to great effect, and I like that there's not only its 2 bits flying off, but her ponytail is flying as well. What I think puts this above Greninja for me though is probably the hand placement. I like her hand being closer to her face here as it feels a bit more sneaky. 11. Charizard. He's also jumping away like our last 2 ninjas, but I think the fact that he's a much bigger body makes this far more impressive. Most of the bigger characters in the game are firmly planted on the ground, so Charizard flying in contrast shows how he's gotta be pretty agile. Obviously, he's not quite as fast as Sheik or Greninja, but his speed is pretty up there. The fact that he's jumping back while also keeping that menacing stare shows that he's just as aggressive as he is evasive. And of course, I gotta love the fire effect for the tail. I think I do still slightly prefer Incineroar's belt, but this certainly doesn't disappoint. 10. Sonic. It only makes sense for the fastest thing alive to get a render that has him speeding by. The extremely exaggerated way his legs are stretched out here is perfect to express how running is his main attribute. His arms shooting back also give a good sense of his speed. But of course, a Sonic render wouldn't be complete without some sort of cocky grin, and I don't think that fits better on any other character. 9. Fox. Again, this one shows how light he is on his feet. I'm sure a lot of you guys are picking up on a pattern from most of my favorite renders by now. But what makes me like this one more than what we've seen so far is the inclusion of his laser. Like I said, pointing a weapon is pretty cool to me, and since I think Fox is pretty cool too, I can't complain about that. 8. Joker. If you've been paying attention, I'm sure you all can guess what I like about this one. His pose feels much more stylish than the last few though, which I think is in line with Joker's Phantom Thief persona. The way his hand flips up towards his face and his dagger coasts behind him in his other hand gives this one just an extra bit to set it apart. Plus Joker's smile fits incredibly well. 7. Bowser. Probably the single most aggressive render of the bunch. This looks like the last thing someone sees before getting absolutely mauled to death by this beast. Him raising his hand so far above his head looks terrifying, and the fact that he's stepping into the swipe just adds even more power behind it. His expression also looks incredibly aggressive. You can tell he's gonna give it his all, and his all is a lot. 6. Luigi. In stark contrast, Luigi looks like the victim to Bowser's swipe. This one is incredibly goofy, but I think that's just about perfect for Luigi. His face looks so worried, which fits his cowardly personality perfectly too. Luigi has always gotten some wacky renders in Smash, but I think this might just be his best one. 5. Sora Ultimate Form. Okay, this one is stupid and dumb, but no other render stares directly into the camera like this, and that's extremely funny to me. Genuinely, this render is the reason that I use this ult whenever I play as him. Just having his smug smile stare directly at you from the UI is absurdly funny. What's even better is that this render is directly based on some Kingdom Hearts artwork, so I don't think anyone can deny that this one is peak. 4. Dr. Mario. Again, this one is so simple and funny that I can't help but love it. He's just thinking, which is such a normal doctor thing to do that I find it funny on Mario. It's even funnier to imagine he has no clue what he's talking about, but is still trying to think it through anyway. It's also just a good way to separate Dr. Mario from regular Mario. His series is a bit of a puzzle series, so a more grounded thinking pose fits pretty well. This might just have Joker School beat in terms of how easy it is to do in real life, but the simplicity of it is what makes it fantastic. And very funny. 3. Wario. I mean, come on, this one is the most pompous, overconfident, egotistical render on the roster. Not only is he strutting in like he owns the place, but he's flashing up W's on his hand to make sure you know that Wario has just entered the building. The open mouth smile is also so gross and loud, but you know Wario wouldn't care about that. He's just making his presence as noticeable as possible, and there's nothing that screams Wario more than that. 2. Mario. Okay, I obviously have bias for my main man himself, but the idea behind this one is perfect. Not only does it represent Mario, but it represents Smash at the same time. Mario's whole thing is about platforming and jumping around, so having a fully air-based render in Smash makes a lot of sense. On top of that though, he's actually just doing his neutral air attack here. Smash Bros is obviously a platform fighter, so aerial attacks are a big part of what makes it special. Having the #1 fighter on the roster represent that aspect of the game makes a lot of sense to me. And again, since Mario is a platformer character, it doesn't feel out of place on him at all. Not to mention that this archetype of neutral air is extremely common, making it a fitting choice to represent Smash as a whole. And of course, Mario's expression is also great here. I know a lot of people think Smash portrays Mario as too angry, but I think this fits him perfectly. Not only is Mario a fun-loving character, but he's also very determined and a bit competitive. I think that more competitive side shining through in a fighting game like Smash is completely logical. Overall, Mario probably has the best designed render in the game as it represents the character and the game itself perfectly. But unfortunately, I thought it'd be really funny if someone watched this video all the way to the end just for #1 to be Steve! I mean, this one is just really funny. It's almost certainly the easiest render for them to make in the game, but I wouldn't want Steve to have anything else. I mean, it just fits with Minecraft's beautiful simplicity. They could have added more movement here, but they didn't, and I think that makes this both 100 times funnier and also more accurate. It's especially funny with how Steve has taken over the competitive side of things, so you just see him standing there all the time, menacingly. His render fits in the game, but also feels strangely alien, which I think describes their implementation of Steve pretty perfectly. Now, obviously, I have a lot of bias, seeing as Minecraft is one of my favorite games, but you came to my ranking, so you're gonna hear my opinion. It may not be the most complex render design-wise, but it's certainly very funny. So it's for those reasons that I think Steve has to be my personal favorite render in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. But anyways, that's it for this video. Were you desperately wanting me to rank Master Hand's render because he's playable for about 3 seconds in World of Light and you hate me for not doing it? Let me know in the comments. I'm keeping this outro short because I was planning to make a short video this week, and this is absolutely not that. Hope you all enjoyed it though. But before I go, I've got to thank my members, being Linhard von Hevering, Fredbear's Diner, Schmendy, Maidzio2, Magnus and Larslot, Trifector, Tippy, Driveones Likes Fire Protection, Mario Master 101, Hippopotamus, Levi Strux, Nuclear, Cassie Channel, Blessed Tiger, Yanni the Duck, Wyatt Derpy, Trader Mo, Mevins 2001, Kid Trunks 15, Enchanted Skull, SMA, B Major 2003, Arson the Raboot, Sir Musti, Belandor, Cinder CC, Jade Avery, Pronto Clone, Thicky Reiki, Ungenio TM, CW McCain, JubeTube, Tesseract, Jameson Pageson, Golden Sin 15, Z Frost, Fluffy Ant, Concanut Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.